Hey, thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to talk about the Flock Audio patch, and let's find out, is it really worth it? I'm going to give you an in-depth review of the Flock Audio patch. I'll share with you my start to finish experience, and hopefully I'll answer any questions in the process that you might have, and maybe even shed some light on what all the patch is about. Full disclosure before we get started, this video is not sponsored. I wasn't sent a demo unit. This is my unit that I purchased. Fun fact, I even missed the pre-orders, so here I was missing out on the discount. But anyways, I just wanted to be clear. And then also, I've known Darren since 2017. He's the guy who started Flock Audio. Kept in contact with him, but mostly bugged him about the patch when he finally told me about it. And it's always kind of been on my radar. And I've kind of wondered, is it really worth it for guys like myself? Or is it just for big studio guys? Purchasing the unit. This is extremely straightforward. You just go to Flock Audio's website and click the Buy Now button. You select your operating system and just go through the steps. You get your confirmation email and you just wait. I received my patch in about 3 weeks, and that was after they began shipping the units. Since the majority of the first initial orders are being shipped currently, you shouldn't have to wait as long as I did. Just as they continue to fulfill orders, the downtime should be minimized. My unit was delivered December 31st, New Year's Eve, by DHL. I'm not sure if DHL is shipping worldwide for them or if it was just for the States, but either way, for my first experience with them, it was a good one. The box came in unharmed. When you get the box, it's pretty large. So of course you have your standard 19-inch rack, but it's kind of considerably wider than that. One of the reasons why is when you open it, you'll see there's a little box next to the patch that's, encased in foam. Basically, that contains it's an external power brick and of course IEC cable and USB. So a few other things that you get in the box with your patch unit. You actually get a personalized thank you letter. I'm not sure if this was just for the pre-orders, but it is personalized to me. It says, "Dear Jacob, I wanted to personally thank you for your patience and support of Flock Audio with the release of our new product, the patch system." And of course, so on. But that was a really thoughtful thing. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to my gear, so it makes it special. The other thing, it includes patch quick start guide, just get you up and running quickly. And then it also includes a software registration key. The number is under my finger. That's specific to your unit, which allows you to access the online profile. And then the other thing it includes is what they call the hardware index setup template. So the hardware index setup template is a really nice tool just to have if you haven't pre-planned your wiring setup. Keep in mind that when you do set up your outboard gear, you're going to want to match the inputs and outputs on the patch to a single unit. Just so, for example, we'll take this 1176. You're going to want the output of the patch going to the input of the 1176, and then the output of the 1176 going to the input of the patch, and you can pick whatever channel numbers you want to use. This is going to save you extra work in the long run, and it's just going to increase your ease of use with the patch. There's a place on the website where you can request features, and the cool part is I believe that they listen to most of the feedback that they're given. You'll find I made a lot of suggestions, well, not a lot, but a few. And one of them was if they made this template into a PDF that could be edited and saved, just because I like to have that stuff on file. And also it would have been nice to have ahead of time. It would have just been just that much easier. And in today's world, I think we all can agree when things are that much easier. It's just a nicer experience all around. So let's talk about installation. After I had torn out my old patch bay, I installed my patch system. Something to notice is that the unit is fully enclosed, top and bottom, but there are some vents on the side. To me, it's a nice design because it seems like everybody puts the vents on the top or the bottom. And I mean, come on, we're trying to stack as much gear as we can inside of these racks. And when you have to add a space in between these different preamps, it gets a little frustrating. So it was nice for them to put the vents on the side. As far as wiring in the patch with the rest of my gear, personally I found that wiring from the patch, like plugging into the patch first and then moving on to my links or just any other units, it just kind of helped keep it a little bit cleaner. So you may want to go this route depending on where your patch is located inside of your rack. So the very last step I took after installing the patch was to plug in the power supply. You'll notice it has a threaded connector, which is really nice because I have had, where I had to pull a cable and it's pulled out a power plug out of one of my other units. I went to track with it and I'm like, what happened? So again, it's really nice that they thought of that. And if you have that nasty nest, don't worry about it. It's gonna stay secure. After the power cable, I plugged in the USB. Now, the USB cable, I thought it was really nice because, it's about 10 feet long. Don't quote me on that, but that's just my guess. It could be a little bit longer, but I'm going to go with 10 feet. And what's nice is it goes from basically the middle of that unit and it goes all the way up and around to the corner of the desk and then into like a multi USB 3 adapter. And again, with that length, I mean, it just makes it really convenient. I'm not trying to stretch for a plug all the way over here or having to buy an extension. Just a really nice experience. But remember, I do have my patch close to me and close to my computers. If you're going to put your patch, on the other side of the room, you're going to have to get a little creative with some USB runs. But to be honest with you, I think that most people, they've already got the piping put in the floor or through the ceiling or whatever they need to do to make it happen. So again, for my situation, so far, that's awesome. After installation, I was ready to begin the final setup. I went over to the Flock Audio website and went to the My Account section, but when I did, there was a message that their portal is being updated and currently unavailable. So I just followed the instructions there. I submitted my information and patch serial number and just waited. After a few minutes, I got a email from Mike who works in support, and he gave me, simple instructions and a download link to the patch app software. Hopefully the site portal won't be down too long, as it is a bit of a pain waiting for support to email you. At first I was a little frustrated just because you're paying $2,000 for a unit that ultimately you have to wait for somebody to tell you, oh, hold on, we'll allow you to use that. I get it, they're trying to get their software under control, but it is a little frustrating. Frustrations aside, they did respond to my email after 1 a.m. So it's my understanding they have 24-hour customer support, which that already is like incredible. So again, it was just for a few minutes where I was a little frustrated, but you get over it quick. So after I installed the patch app software, I turned on my patch system, and of course you see the little blinking light. It's looking for the software, so I opened the software, the light stopped blinking on the patch, and it connected immediately. So the first thing you want to do to set up your patch app software is to click the hardware setup button in the bottom left corner of the patch app. This opens the hardware setup menu where you can name your I/O racks and deny or allow the phantom power safeguard. You can also turn off the 48 volt phantom power master. You can enable rack numbers or disable them. import or export rack hardware lists, or save your hardware names. It's pretty straightforward. My first time naming all of the rack hardware took me about 15 minutes. I had never used the software before, but it is pretty intuitive. I had my pre-made chart for reference, which was a huge help. And the next morning, I actually ended up changing a few of my routings physically and also in the software. I renamed everything, and it only took me 10 minutes that time. So it is proof that, the more you use it, of course, the faster you're going to get. So after you get everything named, you just hit save hardware and you're good to go. For me, I start with my XLR input and I add my signal chain and finally add my interface input at the end. And if you have a long list of hardware, there is a search bar above your hardware list so you can find gear a whole lot more easily. Let's walk through the patch app and check out the software features and its capabilities. After you add a rack unit to a path, which are of course the blocks in the middle, you can control click, which actually provides a pop-up that will say bypass or remove. This is a nice feature, but another suggestion I made was that we should be able to have the ability to drag the unit off the path to remove it. This is just a feature that would feel natural to me. I find myself trying to do it anyways, even when I know I can't. One of the features that I really love is the mult button. Clicking the M to the right of a rack unit in a path will split the signal from that unit to another path. This is really great when you want to audition multiple preamps or maybe capture a track with different effects, different compressors or EQs. Basically, if you're working with a vocalist, for the first time, you kind of want to hear what complements their voice best, what brings it out. You can maybe run one chain through 1073 into an 1176 or BAE 312 into one of the brute compressors, or kind of just to find whatever you like the most. So you could either just audition them live or track both signal paths and pick the one you like best after you get the rest of the track built around the vocal. So just a few more features and abilities that can be done with the unit. You can turn the phantom power on and off for each channel. You'll get a little warning pop-up just in case you might have misclicked. So unless you're intentionally applying phantom power to your unit, you're not going to fry any gear over a simple mistake. Let's be honest, I think we've all kind of been there where you've got phantom power running in a traditional patch bay and you pull that plug and your heart almost sinks because you're like, did I mess up my mic, or did it mess up the preamp? You kind of worry about that. But with this, kind of eliminates that headache. So you also have the ability to clear a single path or clear all the paths at once. It'll ask you, of course, do you really want to clear everything? The bank button just allows you to switch through, 1 through 8, 9 through 16, so on and so forth. So you can see kind of everything, or full screen the patch software and it'll show you, again, depending on how big your monitor is, it'll show you all the paths. The front inputs and front output buttons, this is another feature that is just amazing. When you turn these on, it disables the rear inputs and outputs 31 and 32. Then it reroutes them to the combo jack inputs and standard output XLRs that are located on the front of the unit. This is one of the reasons I installed the patch toward the bottom of my rack. The front IOs make it extremely convenient to audition new outboard gear or just access inputs quickly. Personally, I'm using those a lot with my Kemper, but actually when I got everything installed and set up, I used those inputs to run audio through just to check, to make sure everything was plugged in correctly and everything's functioning. So that alone, that little convenience is extremely nice. Next, I want to talk about saving and editing routings. This is going to be huge for session prep and especially recall. You can have a pre-made template that is selected from the drop-down menu and pretty much be ready for anything, just like you would in Pro Tools or Logic. You just pull that up, recall that, whether it's maybe you're only doing vocals or guitar, you can pretty much have everything ready to go. I'm just sharing this because it's part of my first impression. In the top right of the software, it says new, save, edit, and delete. When you press new, I was thinking of that as being like pulling up a new session in Logic, for instance. So thinking when you press new, that little pop-up comes to save and then clears out your session and brings up a whole new block, or in this case, new paths. That's not really how this works. The new button is more like a save as button, and I didn't know this, and I had reported it as a bug to them. They were like, no, it's not broken. This is really, the way we designed it to be. For me, it was a little bit unintuitive, but it's not a big deal. Maybe they'll change it in the future. I don't know. I think it would probably take more than just myself to say, hey, I wish it worked this way instead of that way. But just a side note, wanted to share that with you. Also, before I forget, because currently this doesn't apply for me and it kind of is very easily overlooked, but for you guys in larger studios, multiple patch systems can be combined together. The maximum is 8 units, so I'm not going to sit here and do the math, but that's a ton of inputs and outputs. I have what I consider to be a humble setup, and I am currently maxed out on every input and output. If I brought in more gear, I would either have to add a whole nother patch unit or reconfigure. Maybe instead of using all 16 inputs of the Lynx Aurora, maybe I would only use 12 and then dedicate 4 more IO to the patch for outboard gear. But like the guys in the large studios, you will probably most definitely need another unit. The only way this would work like with an entire rig is incorporating analog patch bay. Maybe you already have one. If that's the case, I say go for it. But personally, I wouldn't want to. I'm glad my old patch bays are gone and I don't have a desire to use traditional patch bays anymore because of the convenience that the patch system has offered. Let's talk about the most important thing, and that is sound quality. After my first day with the patch, I got in contact with Darren and I said, hey, look, man, I don't know if it's snake oil or maybe it's my subconscious feeling bad that I spent this much money on a patch bay or what, but everything just seems a little bit brighter to me and a little bit punchier in the low end, and it made me wonder. Okay. Also keep in mind though, I did swap out my cabling. I went from an extremely budget situation. I was using PB48s by DBX. They're just not high quality at all. I think those are $40 patch bays. But the bottom line is, I think between the two, your mileage may vary, but there's definitely a change, and it is a night and day difference. When I did ask Darren about it, he said that I'm not the only one who said this, so that made me feel a little bit better. I'm still a little skeptical there, but again, I can tell a difference, and I don't think it's just snake oil. So that's something to be really happy about, especially for a unit that's so small. You're getting what we all want, is just better sound quality. So we've gone through purchasing, installing, setup, and the different features, but let's talk about some quirks and gripes I have with the patch and the software. I promise this is going to be a honest review, and it is. The first, it's not really a gripe, but it's a quirk. But this first thing we got to talk about is the fan. Yes, there is a fan inside of the patch. So the patch is basically a computer in itself. So of course it's got to be able to dissipate heat efficiently. When you first turn the patch on, you can hear the fan cycle up to the highest speed, and it kind of sounds like a whine. I'll show you on a decibel meter what it's measuring at. It's not very loud, but I know a lot of people might be worried about that, might say, oh, it's going to be too loud. But even at the highest fan setting, it went up, I think it was 3 more dB or something like that. But again, I'll show you on the video. But now also keep in mind that the fan, it is necessary because the unit does get pretty warm. It's supposed to be able to withstand over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. To me, I would think just like a computer, the cooler the operating temperature, the better your performance and longevity the unit's going to have. I'm going to say that for about 90% of people, this little fan isn't going to bother them. It's probably not even going to be on their radar. If you are already using a Mac or a PC tower inside your control room that's next to you, for me, it's not something I really think about. Honestly, when my MacBook Pro heats up and I have one of the new ones, it's loud. The fans spool up and they just stay spooled up during mixing or whatever, and that's a bit frustrating. But I really wouldn't worry about it too much with this unit. For the folks that are reading on any forum, even watching this video, and you're kind of like, I don't know about this. Look, it's totally understandable. The industry has never seen anything like the patch before. And I'd say most of us are being ultra sensitive about our investment or wanting to make the investment. If you're concerned about the fan, or if there are people concerned about the fan, I believe that's where any complaint really would be rooted, as far as like a physical issue with the patch itself, or they're just the type of person that's going to nitpick and complain about everything, and those people will never be happy in life, so we'll just move on. But ultimately, is the fan a deal breaker? No, definitely not. A little noise is a small price to pay in exchange for the many advantages that the unit brings. Also, on a side note, if for some reason a bunch of us were like, hey, the fan just is constantly running too loud, it spools up too often, well, they can actually change that inside the firmware, which is really nice. So just keep this in mind. Software and firmware things can be changed. Of course, we just want it perfect now, which is perfectly fine too. The next thing I'm going to talk about is an actual gripe, and it's with the patch app itself, and it's the font size. The font size is really, really small. And I know it's coming up as an update, but if you have a 4K monitor, you might have a really tough time seeing your labels. In a side-by-side comparison with the TextEdit app, you're looking at a size 9 font. This is really frustrating, especially for me, because there's no zoom option, and when you full screen, the lettering stays the same. I don't think that the patch app is technically still in beta, but you know, I thought they would have had this figured out. It can be fixed, but it's just a matter of waiting on the update. I wanted to share that with you. It's something to be aware of. So those two issues are like really my main concerns. A couple of minor things. It would be really cool if they offered USB-C to USB-B cable, just because since USB-A is being phased out, of course, Flock Audio could have been way ahead of the curve and just just offer that, maybe just an option or maybe an upcharge. It's kind of future-proofing. But I can also see why they didn't do the USB-C. Number one, they've got to save cost. But as well, a lot of us are on legacy setups. And even if you are migrated to, one of the newer MacBook Pros or iMacs, you're probably using a dock anyways. So for me, it wasn't a big deal, but just a minor thing. Okay, so depending on who you are, this might be a gripe or just a quirk of the unit. I'm not sure, but it's a big one for most of us. It's the price. Currently, the price as of this video being made is $1,999 US. When I've talked to people and they've asked me about the patch system, how I like it, or if I've recommended it to people, I've had a few folks say stuff like, well, I'll never spend that much money on a patch bay or pay that much for a patch bay when the one that I've had for years works just fine. And it always comes back to that, kind of the simple argument, well, why do you buy a BMW over, a Kia? Or better yet, why would you record vocals with a U47 over a SM57? They're both microphones and do the exact same thing, but the U47 is probably going to sound better and yield better results across the board. So unless you're using 1/4 inch patch bays and really low budget stuff, the pricing is not going to be that far off. It is a bit more, but just as a quick comparison, my previous setup was two DBX PB48 patch bay units, 2 packs of 10 seismic audio 1/4 inch cables, and that was around $260. It worked fine for me at the time, and it would still work fine if I still had it. It wouldn't be horrible, but it would get the job done. Even though it worked fine for what I needed, I did have several problems where it would introduce noise and signal loss due to the cheap cabling. You can just tell it's an audible issue. It's just one of those things you end up ignoring because, again, it's that cost, when it's not really on your radar to invest a bunch of money into a patch bay. Before I learned about the patch system, I had actually been starting to research and look into purchasing a Bittree patch-based system. That setup would have cost me around $12.50 with cables. The only advantage that I would have had, I think, with the Bittree was the model I was looking at offered 48 I/O, as opposed to the patch only offering 32 I/O. I'm sure, you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, but that's a $750 difference, 1250 versus 2000. And yeah, it is a pretty large gap, but where I justify the cost is time versus, money. A large part of the music industry in general is being able to work quickly and time efficiently. The Flock Audio patch is all about saving time. Setting up the routings are a breeze. The ability to recall patch setups in just a couple clicks is super simple, and if you have studio assistants, you can have them setting up routings for the next client, maybe on their laptop while you're engineering your current session. Then they can just transfer over the Flock file for the app. But personally, I would spend at least 10 minutes, sometimes even more, patching in, getting ready for whatever session I'm going to do. Even for small sessions, it feels like it just took so much time. You're patching in your mics, you're patching in preamps, EQs, compression, and then it's got to go back into whatever your interface is. And by the time you sit there and you figure out, do I want a direct signal? Okay, then I have to route, this output over here. It kind of becomes a mess. And then if you miss a channel, which we all have done, if anybody says, oh, I've never missed a patching in ever, you're lying. Let's be honest. Everybody's done it, and it happens. It happens to the best of us. And so again, you have to patch everything in. You have to test it before your client gets here. It just adds to the work. For some people, that might not be a big deal, but for a lot of us, where you have other things to do, you've got another session later, you're going to want a quicker solution. And of course, as I mentioned before, as far as with phantom power, you don't have to worry about accidentally unplugging a cable, or maybe you plugged it into the wrong place and you said, oh, I just need to move that over really quick. Well, then you have to turn off your phantom power on the unit, and you have to wait for it to die down. Okay, turn it back, change the patch over, turn it back on. But again, that's all taken out with the patch system. It's not just convenience, but it's peace of mind. Ultimately, you have to ask, who is the patch really for? Some of you might still be saying it's still too expensive and I wouldn't benefit from the abilities and advantages that it gives. Can't justify that. And if that's the case, then I would say that the patch might not be for you. If you can get by with a $250 setup, well, then do that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's going to make or break your mix. If you are watching this and you're like, holy smokes, this is going to save me rack space, it's going to save me time, my workflow is going to be, totally improved by this, then I'd have to say, you know what, go for it, because you're not going to regret it. Even if you're just in a major studio or a home project studio, if that's what you want to call it, it's going to be a comfortable improvement for pretty much anybody with an audio routing need. And if you do end up picking one up, you will never want to use a traditional patch bay again. It's just that convenient. Personally, I recommend it. I've clearly pointed out a few issues that really do need to be fixed, and I hope they fix it soon, because it is kind of a bummer. Again, you're spending that much money, you want it to work. Well, there you have it. Thanks for watching. I've given you my honest start to finish experience, and also what I think are the major pros and cons to owning a patch. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. I'll try and monitor that and get back to you guys as quickly as possible. Like, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down, whatever, that's fine. And I hope you guys have a good one. Thanks for watching.